G'day, ZiggyD here, and welcome back for another Path of Exile unique item report, this time for patch 0.11.2. You guys really seem to enjoy the last iteration of this video, so I thought I'd make another one for this patch because some of the uniques this week are pretty interesting stuff, and the unique item hunt in general is just a really exciting part of the weekly Path of Exile play shenanigans, something. Anyway, let's jump straight into it. Now, the first unique we're going to be taking a look at out of 3 this week is Deedbill or Deidbell, Gilded Sallet. Now, this item, I have to admit, just isn't that exciting. They can't all be amazing, super impressive unique items, but you know, there's a place for these uniques that are just leveling uniques or just okay uniques to use for specific things, specific builds, or that are just, you know, an interesting thing that gets some stats that you can't otherwise get on rares. Anyway, this one is a leveling unique. It is level 33 and it really has no endgame uses whatsoever. At least, you know, that I can feasibly see. There's better helmets generally that will apply to most builds that could potentially use this. So, let's first up look at these two stats here. We have 26 and 24 dexterity now, as per usual. I don't know the ranges on these since this item has only just dropped. But these two main stats are very handy. This is an armor evasion type helmet, and these two stats can be pretty handy, you know, for requirements, especially if you're not a build that has a lot of strength and dexterity. However, because it is an armor and evasion helmet, these things can normally roll on these helmets, just by the way, but because it is an armor and evasion helmet, most people using armor evasion gear are going to have plenty of strength and dexterity anyway, so that's not a huge benefit, though extra main stats can be helpful as you're leveling to use certain skills and pieces of gear and things like that, but nothing too super exciting. If it was intelligence, that could be interesting because that would allow you to forego picking up some intelligence nodes while you're leveling, so you can use some more supports and auras and things like that while you're leveling. But as it stands, strength and dexterity, nothing too exciting. Now, however, this 231 plus armor here is huge. That's massive for 33. That's like a chest slot worth of armor at that level. So that is very, very good for leveling. That's going to give you a ton of mitigation if you're using this helmet at that level. So not too bad stuff. Now, 20% increased melee damage is really quite good. Now, this isn't physical damage. Now, that should be noted. So this will work on elemental damage mods on your weapons and other gear and things like that. Pretty much any damage done through melee attacks will work with this particular affix here. And 20%, you know, 1/5 extra increased melee damage is pretty nice. Obviously, that's not more. If it was more melee damage, it would be even better, but increased melee damage is still a little bit. So that's a pretty nice mod. Now, this mod here, along with it being an armor evasion type of gear, makes me think that this item will be a pretty good leveling item for elemental cleavers. Elemental cleavers already have, you know, pretty good leveling speed and potential, and this will just make them a little bit more effective. Now, that said, I still think a rare helmet can outclass this, and on that note, let's take a look at the drawback for this particular unique, which I'm not even sure this one really needs a drawback, so... But anyway, it cannot leech when on low life. Now, you probably won't be relying on leech too much at level 33, but there is potential that you are, especially if you've gone blood magic around that point. However, this isn't really that big a drawback because whenever you're on get to low life as a blood magic build, for example, you're not going to be relying on your leech to recover you. You're going to be using a flask. You're going to be using an instant heal flask, no less. So this will almost never come into effect. It sounds really bad because, you know, I need to leech when I'm low life so I can heal, but in practice, I don't think that'll actually be that big a deal. So let's move on from this unique. It's not very exciting, but the other two are pretty interesting. Now, the next one is the Anvil Amber Amulet, and this amulet is awesome. It is so sick. Alright, so let's start off with the drawbacks, because there's quite a few, but that's part of what makes it such an interesting item. So the first two drawbacks we have here are 10% reduced attack speed and cast speed. Now, this isn't a huge deal, 10% isn't too much, and depending on what type of build you're going, it may not be a big deal. Obviously, it is still a drawback, and if you have a build that's trying to stack attack speed for whatever reason, then that's going to hurt you a little bit, or cast speed, but it's not major. However, the big drawback is this 20% reduced move speed, and this is what really themes this item for me. It means that, you know, it's this meant to be this heavy amulet. You can imagine it. It's just such a good thematic item too. It's this heavy amulet you're wearing around your chest, and it's like weighing you down. You can't run as fast when you're wearing it, but it does give you a bunch of other benefits, which we'll get into in a sec. But this 20% reduced move speed, in effect, themes this build towards slow-moving melee characters, especially that are going to stand there tanking and blocking, as you'll see in a moment. But this can be mitigated through movement skills like Leap Slam. Mostly Leap Slam, but Whirling Blades can work as well. Since they don't scale off move speed at all, and often those builds will be stacking no move speed anyway, like for example on my Infernal Blow Marauder at the moment. Now this item wouldn't work for him, but just saying, on my boots, on my Infernal Blow Marauder, I completely forego move speed because I'm using Leap Slam to get around. If you have a build that could use this item and also has that same sort of theme to it where it doesn't need that move speed, then that can be a very good item, and that drawback is kind of mitigated by that. So obviously attack speed is a bit harder to mitigate, like you can't just ignore it like you can this move speed, but you can completely ignore that move speed essentially if you're getting around using Leap Slam or Whirling Blades or something like that. So that's pretty good. Now, the other important thing to note about this is that 20% reduced move speed can actually be a really good thing for Cyclone builds. Now, Cyclone, essentially, the slower you move with Cyclone, the more hits you're going to get as you pass through enemies. You pass through them slower, you hit them more times, you're getting more DPS per cast of Cyclone. Now, not all Cyclone builds need to stack negative move speed, but this is one great item that you can use if you want to go that route. So that's a pretty interesting little side note there. So let's start going on to the benefits. First one here is 415 armor, obviously suiting this theme of this being a really tanky amulet. 415 armor is no small amount. That's you know, half to a third of a decent chest piece at endgame. At level 45, it's quite a lot. But you'll probably be using this as an endgame item, so 415 armor is a nice amount, and it's going to obviously get multiplied out by all of your armor stats and things like that since it's base armor. So that's really, really cool, and just you know, really sets this as being a tanky item even more so. Now, let's take a look at the block, because that's where the rest of this item kind of goes into. Firstly, we have 10% increased block chance. Now, it's pretty easy to get 10 to 20 increased block on this passive tree, and then you can get things like Bringer of Rain, which also give you block chance. Very, very easy to max out your block chance now. This item will help you do it. And on that note, 3% to maximum block chance. Now, you guys probably already pretty familiar with that little passive node on the tree that gives you 2% increased maximum resistances, and how actually a bigger deal that 2% makes. Well, 3% increased max block is going to be pretty similar. You can increase that max block rate, you can break that cap, and since you're also reaching that cap pretty easily, pretty cool stuff. Now, an important thing to note is that since this is an amulet, it does take up the slot that would otherwise be occupied by Stone of Lazarwa, I think it's pronounced. But basically that is the spell block amulet. That means if you want to go this route, you're going to have to forego spell block, because otherwise you'd be using your spell block amulet rather than this one. So you have a decision to make, and I think that's a pretty clever decision by Grinding Gear Games or the Diamond Unique support. I don't know if this is a Diamond created one or not. Pretty interesting, could be. But anyway, you have to make that decision between, do I go for, you know, max out my block as per normal and go for spell block with the Stone of Lazarwa, or do I get this Anvil Amber Amulet and max out my block and just rely on the physical projectile blocking and all that sort of stuff rather than spell blocking, which, you know, bit of a decision, since this is obviously a much better physical blocking sort of amulet, especially with that extra armor and, you know, slowed down move speed, all that good jazz. Then that's pretty interesting. But that's not it. That's not all. There is more. These two here, pretty interesting mods. I like seeing mods like this. 32 life gained when you block, or an amount life gained when you block, and mana gained when you block. I love this. There's a few other items in the game that give you specific things on block. The one that comes to mind, I believe, is one that, I can't remember the name of it, but it gives you energy shield when you block, I think. Anyway, there's other ones that interact with block in this way, and that is a really cool mechanic. Since you're maxing out your block cap, since you're maxing out your block and increasing your block cap, you're going to be blocking quite a lot, especially if you're surrounded by lots of fast-hitting enemies. Let's, for example, put ourselves in the Forest Act 3. We're surrounded by monkeys. They're wailing on us, and we're blocking like something like 78% of their attacks. Each time one of those blocks, we're getting a flat increase to life and mana. They're never going to kill us. You guys saw me stand there and tank some monkeys in a recent video. taking no damage whatsoever through other means, quite a few other means, but just this alone with maxed out block will mean that lots of fast hitting enemies will probably heal you more than they're going to hurt you, and that's pretty cool. So I quite like that. And then on top of that, we have reflects 200 to 250 physical damage to attackers on block. Now Thorns traditionally is pretty rubbish, this sort of reflect damage, but this is getting more and more interesting now, especially with block based builds. You know, we've already got Lightning Shield. Why is that name escaping me right now? You know, Lightning Shield, that damages enemies when you block and they attack you. Anyway, and we've got some other uniques and things that you can, and skills and things that you can do that will reflect damage. Maybe soon in the future we might see some sort of viable tanking, reflect damaging, you know, thing. Anyway, 200 to 250 physical damage is a decent amount at endgame. Every time you're blocking, it's free damage. You're blocking that damage anyway. So it's a nice little increase to your DPS. Not huge, but could potentially sink into some other builds, as I was mentioning. So this is a really cool amulet overall. We're getting, you know, a ton of extra block, ton of extra mitigation, healing from our blocking even, and then damaging enemies from our blocking, and that's really cool. This item to me says that Path of Exile is heading in the direction of more allowing people to more closely define their roles in a party, especially as well, and you'll see that in the next item as well, because this means, you know, combining this with a bunch of other items, we could see people creating pure tanking classes for party play. And since you know, generally this has been something that's been occupied by totems and minions and stuff, maybe we'll start to see some more viable tanking based actual characters rather than minions and totems. So anyway, very interesting item. I'm pretty keen to maybe build a build around it at some point. Anyway, next item, Leer Cast Festival Mask. Now this is a level 28 item, and I wouldn't really say it's a leveling item. I wouldn't use this while leveling. Anyway, let's go straight into the, we'll look at the other stats first. We've got 30 dex, 20 max life, 20 max mana, or an amount of each of those anyway. Okay. Nothing really amazing there. This to me says it's just to mitigate the fact that you can't get any more than that on this item. Now, obviously, big drawbacks of this is that, as you can see, no resistances, no more life than that, and not a major amount of energy shield. So that's going to harm a lot of builds, and that's going to make it difficult to use unless you can make up those things in other slots. So it has that big drawback just in the nature of the item being not super powerful, but that's important. That's an important part of this unique design that grinding gear games have been doing very well, making items that just aren't super powerful but have a very potentially powerful mechanic if you can build a character around it. So 30% reduced damage. This is to yourself, and this is, you know, this is like more. Basically, it actually takes 30% of your damage away. You'll be doing 70% damage effectiveness when you have this item equipped. However, the flip side to that is you and nearby allies deal 15% increased damage. So, okay, so I'm going to be doing 85% damage effectiveness. That doesn't sound very good. And yeah, that's not very good. Now, the reason they've gone that way instead of just saying 15% reduced, 15 or whatever, instead of they're doing that way is because it, apparently it was easier for them to code this way. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. However, a dev has come out and confirmed that this does stack. So, you have a full party of 6 wearing this helmet, you're going to get, let's see if I can count, 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90% increased damage. I can math. 90% increased damage, you know, taken away. Everyone's still getting that 15%, but they're getting 90 on top of that, so they're getting 75 increased damage. This is a support item, guys. Firstly, you could just wear this by yourself if you want to create a support character. Stack a bunch of auras, increase aura radius, you know, do all that good jazz, and just support your party. Now you can play this as just a support, but I want to see some really cohesive parties with 6 characters wearing this helmet. Obviously, as I said, it's a very hard helmet to work into your build because it's not a very strong helmet by itself. It has low stats basically, so it's difficult to work in. But if a party of 6 people can create, you know, their builds in such a way that work together nicely enough and can all wear this helmet, that's awesome. I want to see that happen because that could potentially be a ton of damage. But that's pretty cool. But as I was mentioned on the last item, it seems like some more and more uniques coming into the game that are allowing people to theme their builds towards the, you know, the the typical trifecta, the holy trinity, you know, tank, healer, healer slash support slash DPS. So this could potentially be a nice support item for people who want to play that, or as I said, a fun party rocking 6 of these babies to get that 75% increased overall damage. Pretty cool stuff, pretty interesting item, but probably one that won't see a ton of use, but could be a bit of fun. Yeah. Anyway, that's been the unique report for patch 0.11.2. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these new uniques and maybe ideas for future uniques that you guys might have, or what unique you would create if you were a Diamond supporter. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.